You walk along a very normal trail at the foot of Pikes Peak, your normal boots crunching on normal gravel. You check the time on your normal wristwatch and wipe the sweat from your normal brow. It's your normal time for taking that normal fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Once inside, you are so relieved to hear the pub's normal conversation on topics that are anything but normal, like the arts, faith, and whether it's okay to openly like the Dave Matthews Band. At the corner table, by the fire, you see 4 people. One of them is asking the other 3 whether he should start wearing a fedora to look less ordinary. That's me, your co-host, Matt Mellema. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. So to further that goal, we do all sorts of things. Each spring, we have our big Imagination Redeemed conference, which attracts folks from all across the country. This year, it's at Glen Eyrie Castle. That's right, it's a castle. Some crazy rich person built it in the 1800s here in the mountains outside of Colorado Springs. Come see it. But we also have a regular slate of concerts, lectures, and other events designed to foster love and understanding of arts and faith. And we have our own guild of artists right here in Colorado Springs. And when we aren't creating art, some of us like to podcast, thus Believe to See. The Believe to See table, if we keep the metaphor, the Believe to See and whatever. Okay. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. You should also check out our Facebook page, where we have a ton of new and interesting content to engage with. You could also check out Anselm's 2 other podcasts. That's right, 2 other ones that were a whole fleet. Wait, that's mixing metaphors. There's 3 tables in the pub. And since you're already doing stuff, maybe rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That would help us a ton by increasing the visibility of the show, but, I don't want to tell you what to do, whatever. And finally, our show is brought to you with the help of Wolf & Key Marketing, a Colorado Springs-based digital marketing agency that helps forward-thinking businesses think and thrive in the age of the internet. Whether it's through a new website, better social media presence, or any of their other highly targeted digital strategies, Wolf & Key brings a tailored approach to each of their clients in order to create real business growth. Wolf & Key, purpose over profit. And joined here, this is one of those episodes where the roles are kind of fluid, but I'll go ahead and officially assign her the role of co-host, Mandy Haug. Mandy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. So I don't know if you noticed, I threw in the line about the fedora. Can I tell you a true story about the fedora?
Oh, please, yes.
So a few years ago, I'm out with my wife, her sister, some other people, just shopping. I don't know how they managed to do that, but they did. And I saw this fedora, and I was like, hey, that's cool. So I try it on. I look at my sister-in-law, Lauren, who's on one of the past episodes, and say, hey, Lauren, be honest with me. Can I pull this off? Lauren sort of gives this awkward smile and looks away. And
there's your answer.
Do you agree? Come on, fedora.
Well, it's hard to imagine it. You should have brought one if you wanted a real opinion, but I don't know. I'm not confident that you could swing it. Maybe a newsboy cap.
Oh, well, there we go.
I could see that.
Okay.
Did that assuage the hurt feelings there?
It all balanced out at the end, so that's okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Did the fedora have a fancy band or anything?
Like a feather?
Oh, a feather. I could see you with a feather.
So if I had the feather, you could see me pulling it off.
Possibly.
Okay. So to sort of set the scene for the listeners here, I'm sitting here wearing a cardigan sweater, with a little button up underneath it. Apparently that's not the fedora type. I'm at peace with it. Okay, I'm normal in some ways. But I want to give a little background on this current topic. So as some of you may know by now, because we have been talking about it, the theme for the quarter is the centric artist. So the idea there is that in popular culture, we think of artists as eccentric people who live at the fringes, aren't part of a community. But we, as Christians, are called to be involved in communities, the church community and others. So we're trying to explore how that happens. And one of the thoughts we had at one of our content meetings, and we have content meetings, we're official, was doing an episode about whether or not you need to be a weirdo to be an artist. So it's like, hey, let's do that. We'll have an episode for weirdos, an episode for normal people. So I posted on the Facebook group after realizing, recruiting for this will be kind of tricky because they could be like, hey, do an episode on weirdos, and, well, I think we know where I'm going with this. But
some people don't want to be identified as normal, and some don't want to be identified as weird. So
that is
it's
very
a whole
true.
thing.
It is a whole thing. And that's why we're dedicating this podcast and the next podcast to the concept of weirdos and normal people. So as you probably saw from the title here, this one is dedicated to all the normals out there. Do artists have to be weirdos? So that's what we'll be examining here. And let's bring on some of the other people here who we recruited. And let me tell you why they were recruited. I'll tell you which one of you is the weirdo, which one's the normal one.
I know, the suspense is killing me.
No, what we realized coming from is that a lot of us have times in our lives when we feel like the normal person around all the cool, eccentric artists.
Yes.
And other times when we're around, our friends and family when we feel like the weirdo who doesn't fit in.
Absolutely.
So to underscore that point, we're going to have the same roster of people for both the Weirdo and the Normal podcast. So let's start off. Megan McCluskey, you are one of the Weirdo/Normal people. Hello.
Thank you. I appreciate the ambiguity.
Great. And you have been on the show before. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. But tell us a little bit about you and your art.
I do paintings, mostly of landscapes, but since joining Anselm, that's been transforming, as my imagination has been as well.
Wow. Okay. That's a really good elevator pitch.
You're welcome.
So Megan also did one of the keynote paintings for one of our Imagination Redeemed conferences, which is available on the internet, I'm saying without asking you beforehand, right?
It is. It's on the internet, meganmccluskeyart.com.
There we go. You're welcome. And our other guest is Gianna Soderstrom. Gianna, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thank you.
And wait, let's keep the metaphor. Welcome to the table. We're at the Believe to See table in the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about you and your art.
So first of all, my name is Gianna Soderstrom. Sorry, minor correction there. And I am a writer, a nonfiction writer.
Okay. What kind of nonfiction?
I write essays about everyday life, which you could call ordinary and normal, or you could call it weird, because I tend to have a, unique perspective, I think.
I think so too.
Okay, so with that was a good segue. We didn't even rehearse that. So let's get into the main topic. So we're focusing on normal people today. But before we do that, let's just go around the table. Do you consider yourself to be, in general, normal or a weirdo? Mandy, I'll start with you.
Oh, great. It's sort of like what you were saying before. It depends on who I'm with. I was always weird and I always felt like I was too much around my family because I'm the only really artistic one. So I felt like there was a lot of me and I needed to kind of rein it in and learn how to be normal because that was the positive thing. But then around artists, I feel boring. And I don't know if normal and boring are synonyms, but that is how I view it. If I'm around a bunch of artists who are exciting, I don't feel like the exciting one. So that didn't really answer your question.
Kind of did.
Okay.
So I give you a B-. Okay,
thank you.
So Megan, normal or weird?
Okay. When I originally answered your question on our little Facebook chat, I said it depends on what I need to draw from, depending on the project. My energy level, I can go off into weird, hours of working on things. Schedule-wise, I guess sometimes I feel like a weirdo, especially when, I get around other Christian people who do, get up in the morning and do a morning time and go to bed on time, and I start to feel kind of weird. But I also feel similar to Mandy, kind of too normal sometimes.
Yeah. My family would be listening to this going, you feel too normal?
But I guess a tiny bit of personal background. I grew up in a family of artists, and so my normal was probably weird.
There you go.
So maybe I'm still confused.
Okay. Gianna Soderstrom, your turn.
I think I have to agree with Mandy. I feel Pretty normal most of the time, actually. But there's like, I will say something or react a way that's very different from the people around me, like my husband or my friends, and they just look at me like, wait, what? Your brain went where?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel pretty weird in those moments. And then I will tell you, though, I never feel more ordinary than when I am in the Starbucks drive-thru and my toddler looks at me and says, "Mommy, coffee?" Yes, son, and it's because of you that I need this coffee right now.
That's awesome.
Well, one of the benefits of being the person who starts talking is you get to be the one to go last. So I sort of bounce back and forth. I think really that is one of the answers, sounds like we've all landed at, is are you normal or weird? It's kind of nice, a good lawyer answer. The answer is, well, it depends. When I feel like most of the time, I forget if it was one of you all or if it was someone else on our Facebook thread, used the phrase normal passing.
Oh, that was Evangeline.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Evangeline.
Yes.
I feel like that is where I come down, where I can usually, most of the time, pretty good. Like when I'm at work, I try to seem normal. When I'm, at one of like my conferences, all these other coworkers, I try to do that. But I feel like inside, there's a lot of weirdness going on that I can usually keep to myself, but who knows. But then when you're around other artists, it's like, well, guys, I don't know about you. I want to go back and, watch the Broncos game. Is that weird? I'm here wearing my cardigan. Is that not artsy enough? I don't know. So I feel like it comes down to it. There's the potential that it can be the worst of both worlds. It's like, well, too weird for normal people and too normal for weird people. Oh, crap.
Yep.
Are we all in that boat together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, solid, yes.
Okay, normal passing then. That's nice.
Okay.
So let's sort of pivot a little bit. And I want to go in a different order so I can keep everyone on their toes.
Oh, okay.
So Gianna, tell me about when you first started getting into art. And if when you first started doing that, did you feel too normal for the art community or what? Tell me about early Gianna the artist feeling too normal.
Oh, dear. Okay. Yeah, when I was little, I was not good at a lot of things, or very not good at most things, really. Like the things everyone else thought were cool, like sports or, different school projects, whatever. But when it came to writing stories, I was decent. And so being a weird homeschooler, my mom found a weird homeschool mom who was also good at writing and had essays published in several different journals to help coach me through that and kind of help me with my writing. And so then I went from solidly average in all of the things and feeling like too weird with this writing on the side to being not a part of this family, but with this family where art was highly valued and I felt way too normal to try to pull off anything skillful and artistic with them.
Okay, so what about you felt too normal? You were just like, hey, these clothes aren't avant-garde enough. What was going on there?
Well, the clothes for sure, but...
You didn't have a fedora?
No fedora.
Oh, dang.
If I did, it was lacking a feather. There's just... something was off. Their entire family was artistic, and so they were writers. They were good with pencils and colored pencils. They were good at like DIY projects, the kind you find on blogs and that everyone else tries and then posts their fail pictures of. Like they could succeed at those. Wow. And I've never been crafty or artistic with like visual art. So I had my small skill in writing, and it definitely did not feel like weird and wild enough to be part of their group or club or what have you gathering. I felt way too normal.
Okay, on that point, Megan, I don't want to exclude you, but you're not going to have any role in this little conversation topic here.
Oh.
Okay, so last episode we talked to Jason Brubaker, who's a super, super talented indie comic artist, and I was reading his stuff to prep for it, and I was like, dang, this is like real art, like this is an actual artist.
Right.
Like when you're a writer, it's like, I wish I could be, I'm very jealous of these like real artists who like make something beautiful with paints and colored pencils.
Yeah.
All the words I use are in the dictionary, pretty much. I just find them and put them in the right order, which doesn't... Anything else from the writers? And I know, Megan, you actually do the real arts, whatever. But
I'm the real weirdo.
No, I think there are times, I think earlier on when I was newer to the Arts Guild, I felt like I was like, sorry, I'm just a writer. But, there's no just. What is it from Finding Neverland? Just what a horrible candle snuffing word. Anyone following me on that? One of our listeners has to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, see, I'm weird. Okay. Hey, I'm weird. It does feel sort of, everyone has to write. I mean, my husband is an engineer, aerospace engineer, and he has to write. So it's just sort of, I don't know, an amped up version, or like what makes this, I don't know, that exciting? What do you think?
Yeah, I think writing is such a central part of education.
Yes.
That it doesn't feel special when you get slightly good at it.
Right.
Whereas art, like you kind of are forced to take one art class and some kids love it.
Right.
And some kids love it and are good at it, and the rest of us just kind of hope to improve enough to get a good grade.
Right. And actually, can I ask Megan something? Like, do people ever tell you, oh, I wish I could paint a painting? Does anyone say that to you?
It's usually just comments about making straight lines or stick figures.
Because I can speak for all the writers. We get a lot of, oh, if I had time, I'd write a book. Oh, I think I have a book. And so it just, I think the general public views it as something that, just anyone could do if they sat down and tried. So that might be part of the normalcy.
So would you like to add anything else, Megan, or just take a victory lap?
Wow, I feel so
Does she have a weird
normal
trophy?
in the art. I feel normal for an artist.
Well, let's...
Like, you just told me I was a real artist. Like, how normal is that?
Well, let's...
You see what I'm saying?
Let's transition then. Let's talk about you getting into the art world. And did you have any times when you're like, getting better at your craft, you're like, oh, am I too normal for all these guys?
Okay, yeah, sure, okay. I'll tell my story. So I really got into the art world not until college. I was more of an observer of the art world up until that point. And so once I started, and the only reason, I guess, that I was really passionate in the beginning about taking drawing and painting classes was because I didn't want to do math in college. And so I picked thanks. I picked the degree where I didn't have to do any. So that was art. And so a little bit of a cop-out, but I ended up surprisingly feeling relationally like I had found a place where I could belong. And that was among other artists, which kind of surprised me. But I didn't really give my art, I guess, the honor or credit it deserved, but I did really well at it. So I guess I wasn't really pushing the bounds. I was kind of just painting according to what I thought was expected and got really good grades, but it wasn't like edgy or provocative, or I wasn't trying to make any statements. So in that sense, it felt really normal.
Okay, well, that's actually right on. So you get the good grades, which I'm guessing in the arts, like there was an arts building on campus. I was one of the normal people in the English building, so we're like, oh. But I'm guessing in the arts building, being the guy who gets good grades, I mean, isn't that sort of defeating the point? Or am I just thinking about like 1970s rock and sticking it to the man?
Yes, if you're like you're trying to pass, yes, for sure. That was a thing for college. I think that was a thing for anyone who went to school anywhere. So that was important, but I don't know. We just learned about so many artists that didn't do art for grades, so it just felt, I don't know, more boring, I guess. I'm so boring.
Sorry, Van Gogh, you died in squalor in Paris so that Megan could just get her good grades in college. Mandy, did you have a similar experience for feeling like the normal person?
Well, like I said before, I was always the weird person in my, nuclear family, my mom and dad and sister. I was the weird one. But I did not pursue writing for a really long time because I didn't feel like I had enough to say, maybe because I did feel too normal. And so it was just sort of something for years and years, I just wrote for me. And like I have all these old binders with notebook paper in them with really horrible poems. So I just wrote for me, and I didn't think about pursuing it because I didn't think I was unique enough or had a voice, I guess.
Okay, so my story, I definitely felt like I was the normal one in all my English classes in college, sort of. So I was an English major, English with a writing concentration, not like one of those sellout journalism majors. I just love writing for its own sake. But in those classes, I was generally either the only dude in my classes or one of like two guys in the classes. So in the sense that I was the token male, I guess I was weird. But because, I don't know. I just feel like English major women are like, I don't know. This is just me being an ignorant college student. But whenever I'd see another dude in the English department, I'd be like, what are you doing here, weirdo? And then like chase them away because I want to be the only guy here. This is my territory. Go. You're strange. Go write your poems. Do your slam poetry. I'm here being... Okay, anyway. So that...
Is that like an alpha male thing? That sounded weird.
Or were you just trying to up your odds of getting a date? I mean, when did Danielle come into the picture?
Like the fedora, the only man.
When you put it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I viewed myself as... I'm an English major dude, but I'm normal. I play sports. I play video games. And then those other guys, they'd come in with... I'm going to date myself here. Like their tight jeans, smoking their clove cigarettes is like, oh, whatever. I don't know.
So you were the only guy, but you weren't the only guy, but you were the only guy in a cardigan type thing. Is what
I feel like I was the only normal man in there.
Okay.
There were some weirdo English girls. There were some normal English girls. I was the one, in my mind, the one normal English man. Right. And all the other, the few other weirdos were just guys, running around, like I said. I'm not prepared to unpack all of that here.
Yeah.
And saying it's like, wow, I kind of suck. But that is where I'm coming from. And I shouldn't still be talking about it, but here I am speaking into a microphone.
Sorry.
And I'm going to transition. I'm going to take the next question here.
Okay.
So there are times when you're sort of in the art world and you see people who seem to really... their brand, or they really feed off being weird and being outside of society. So the question is, do you think that being the normal artist negatively affects your art? Let me start with an example that sprang to mind for me. So a few years back, there's this article, and it's sort of like a lot of viral articles where it sort of does its rounds and everyone gets mad or gives their opinion and it sort of goes away. Well, there's this article written by a guy who's an MFA professor, Master of Fine Arts, so writing professor, and his whole spiel was basically like, hey, if you want to be a real artist, you need to be super hardcore. Talking about how you need to be like dedicated to being a novelist when you're a very young child. You need to write every day. You're going to write stuff that never gets published, but you just work. And all these people with their touchy-feeling emotions here just wanting support. No, being an artist is being just... maniacally devoted to that and only that.
Sacrificing and...
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Like sacrifice everything for the sake of writing your, artsy novels that nobody will read except MFA students, that right. Sort of thing. So one of my reactions when I read that was, oh, here am I worrying about things like my family.
How dare you?
So ordinary.
Am I not dedicated enough to be a real writer?
You're so small-minded.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to... I don't know if you think you're hardcore, go for it. Anyone else think of ways that being normal kind of may impact their art?
Well, honestly, for me, I got an agent with my novel, but she cannot sell it because it's mainstream, and that's not really being purchased anymore. Like the editors, they all want, it's got to have some kind of genre attached to it, and mine is just about a family. Sorry, I don't know. So my agent loves my book, and the publishers give good responses to it, but they're like, oh, it's not enough of whatever. So I would say yes, very much so. For me, apparently I write too normally. Normally? This is why I write. I could have edited that. Nobody would have known. Anyway.
have thoughts about this too. I think some of the best artists I know seem to live kind of ordinary lives. And I also think that a lot of the reasons we turn to art is to like either enhance or escape our lives. And that can be either really good or really bad or just medium. But I don't think we stick with art, like we don't stand and stare at a painting or continue reading a book if it doesn't find some way to touch us. And if it's completely different from us and everything in our minds as we're approaching it, like we're not going to stand there and engage with it. So I think normalcy, as it does impact your art, can be a really good way of letting that art engage with an audience. So I don't think being normal is a bad thing with art. Like I would read a book about a family because...
Okay, can you be a publisher and buy them? We'll talk.
Okay.
I'm just spitballing here, Mandy.
Yeah.
Maybe the family could be Amish.
Oh, there you go. Yes, and there should be a romance in there too. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. I'll spin that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, Megan, do you feel that at times being normal is bad for your art?
Yes. Sometimes because of all, my great grades in art school and learning how to paint, I guess, quote unquote, traditional oil paintings, specifically landscapes, I've received comments along the lines of, oh, that's interesting. That's kind of normal. Like, oh, you don't see a lot of that among the contemporary artists these days, do you? I'm like,
ouch.
No, you're right. Or venturing into more Christian spheres, it doesn't feel Christian enough or overtly Christian enough a lot of the time. And then also on the other end, it can also feel too Christian when I've shown, like, for example, the Cathedral Skies painting that I did for the conference last year. I've shown it to people who who wouldn't call themselves Christian, and they're just kind of confused by it. Like, it doesn't really land anywhere. There's also some negative connotations with the general public about cathedrals.
Oh.
Hashtag Notre Dame.
Right.
So just, it feels neither here nor there. A lot of times also I'm worried that, okay, these are just all my insecurities just flowing out. It's forgettable, like, oh, that's so beautiful, and also not memorable.
That's hard.
Mostly because I get like, oh, those are pretty clouds. Have you ever looked at fill in the blank, this artist? Or, oh, I know an artist, we're great friends, and yeah, she used to do oil paintings until she had kids, and the fumes are really harmful. So now she weaves and makes tapestries, and she's like so much cooler. And I'm like, wow, I'll look her up.
Great
so I just
feedback.
I do love finding out about other visual artists, so I do take a lot of notes when I get into those conversations, but it also makes me feel like I just reminded you of somebody else rather than like...
Oh, right. Like derivative?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't see that in your work at all.
Thanks, Mandy.
No.
Yeah, and that... Sorry, I'm still thinking about all the things I uncovered about myself last time I talked. I have noticed also there's this sort of thing among a lot of people who have writerly ambitions where your taste in literature, movies, TV, it's assumed to be a certain way, and if it's too normal, then it's like you feel like you need to defend yourself. So I'm kind of insulated from this because I write YA middle grade fantasy, so I can read all that fun stuff, be like, oh, it's market research, don't worry about it. But I also like things like detective fiction and all these other sort of normal things. I like The Office. I like Parks and Rec. I don't watch any of that edgy stuff, really. I mean, I'm wearing a cardigan for crying out loud. So, has anyone else felt like they're when they're among like artsy individuals, you need to sort of think, oh, what was that one like super obscure artsy book that I read and hated a couple of years ago? Yeah, I'll make a reference to that.
I mean, there are times that I've implied I've read things, like just nod along. I mean, I think you and I have talked about that. If a book comes up that I haven't read, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, and imply that I've read it.
That should be a whole course in college, implying that you've read books.
Yes.
I always feel guilty when people talk about how much they love The Great Gatsby, because I did not fall in love with it the first time I read it.
Neither did I.
And I haven't read it a second time because I didn't fall in love with it.
I would like to request the floor for later.
Okay.
I'll be making my defense on behalf of Gatsby, but go ahead.
She threw up
I
her
just
hands.
don't love it. I don't know. I'll read it again eventually. I'm sure I will.
Well, okay, counterpoint. First of all, you're wrong. Gatsby's great. But now that I've addressed that
I'm glad we're on
satisfactorily
the
to
other
everyone.
side of the room.
I actually feel, because I like Gatsby, but I feel it's kind of a normal thing because that's one of those books that we're all supposed to read in like high school or college.
Yeah.
So it's not edgy enough. So it's one of my favorite books, but I'm a little ashamed of it. So
Oh, because
we
that's
are
fair.
both
That's fair.
embarrassed about our feelings toward Gatsby, but for totally
they're-
opposite ways.
Yeah.
That's funny. I feel guilty that I like Gilmore Girls.
Don't feel guilty.
I mean,
Gilmore
I love
Girls
the
is
show, but I'm
amazing.
always hesitant to admit it around certain people because I'm like, that's pretty mainstream. Like, I don't want to be that normal person who just loves Gilmore Girls.
I'm a Gilmore Girls evangelist, so it's okay.
Do you guys do you guys listen to the podcast Gilmore Guys?
Yes. Yeah.
It's
It
great.
was
It's just
good.
two dudes who watch an episode of Gilmore Girls and talk about it.
Yep.
And I had listened to the podcast, listened to more episodes than seen the show. I will say, Gilmore Girls, some shows, you have certain things you love, certain things you don't like. For Gilmore Girls, I love and hate the exact same things. Like that dialogue that's sort of like verbal ping pong with all
Yes.
those like 1999 pop culture references. I love it, and I also hate it.
Because it's not realistic.
Well,
But-
you're like,
It's-
oh, that's kind of
it's
clever,
just-
but you're also like, Lorelai, you suck. Just stop. Revealing other things about me.
Anyway.
So let's go to the positive side of all this. Are there any ways that you feel being the normal person among your artist group has actually made you a better artist? Megan, you're to my right, so you get to go first.
Made me a better artist. I guess if a person were to consider themselves normal, which could be defined in a really, I guess, a lot of ways, I'm also not willing to go there right now. But sorry, I'm tripping. I need to find my audience, my normal beauty appreciators who like a lot of color, who like Colorado, who probably live in Colorado or have visited and fell in love with it. Again, color, that would be an important factor, and perhaps a more traditional style of painting. So I'm looking for probably, I'm not going to go there.
Oh,
Are you just like painting out your ideal audience member?
I'm trying to think of it would have to be like a normal client, I guess. Do you see why I'm not going to say anything? Backing myself into a corner.
Okay. I think I see where you're going. So I'll go where I was going to go and see if we're going in the same direction here. Okay. So I feel like being sort of normal, weirdo, normal passing has a couple advantages. First of all, especially in the writer context, I think so much of that MFA literary journal stuff is just totally insufferable. And I think it's insufferable because all the people there have exactly the same background. Like a lot of contemporary poetry is written by MFA professors and is read by MFA students. And the number of short stories where the protagonist is a middle-aged male who's a creative writing professor at a state university just boggles my mind. And really, because they're all in that kind of enclave, or the enclave of weirdness, they, whether they see it or not, are totally cut off from other people, the world out there. So I feel like me having an actual job, having, a family and all this stuff makes me more in touch with, I feel like I'm like Robert Burns, the common man. But also, I finding your audience is kind of a tricky thing, and I think in an ideal world, I'd like to be, I think all of us would, like to be able to communicate with people who don't consider themselves who don't define themselves as like arts lovers, who aren't that sort of type dyed in the wool, but can still produce high quality things that just appeals to people of broader sensibilities without it being crass and consumerist. And I don't know how you toe that line. Mandy, how do you toe that line?
Oh, golly, I don't know. Wow, sprung that on me. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about how the definitions of normal and weird really just shift over time and person to person as well, because like Andrew Wyeth is one of my favorite painters, and for a long time he was not respected at all in the art world because his paintings were too realistic, which if you really look at them, they're certainly not cubist or anything like that. I mean, they're landscapes and portraits and they all look realistic, but it's not realism. There's an argument that can be made that it's still impressionism because it's so evocative of emotion. And so I think, fortunately, I think probably after he died, he got respect. That's how it happened. But it's just interesting to me that an artist who is so prolific and is generally so widely respected and loved for a while was really put down and insulted by the art people for not being interesting enough. So I don't know. For me, that's kind of what honestly, if I could, I would say that would be analogous to what I would like to be as a writer. I like to read widely, but I don't have the kind of brain that can do what you do and like make dragons and write stories about things like that.
Well, spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry. That's called tease. That's a tease.
I've been talking a lot about dragons on the podcast. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's okay. But I don't have that mind, and that's okay with me. If I were to, like what I was going to say is I think the way an Andrew Wyeth painting is very realistic but also evocative, that's what I shoot for in my writing. I don't know if I'm going to have a market for it, and so then that's kind of where you get down to the nitty-gritty of why am I doing this? I'm doing it out of obedience because it's something that God tells me again and again I'm supposed to be doing. I don't have to know the end result to just do it. And every time I try to quit, it doesn't last. It'll last like 4 hours. I'll be like, I'm never writing again. And my husband's like, okay, honey. Talk to you at our next meal and you will have you'll be back at it. So that did not answer your question. You're welcome.
Thank you. So what you said triggered a soapbox issue for me.
Oh,
so
good.
if you don't mind.
No.
So I was reading the other day about this movement to make federal buildings, when they're building federal buildings, to make buildings that aren't hideous. So I think we all agree, because we all have two eyes and a brain that processes the information that our eyes send to us, that most federal buildings that were built in like the brutalist style are absolute abominations.
Okay, wait, is that an actual term? Or
yeah. Yeah, that's, like they're concrete and they look like a giant larva pupating or something like that.
But was that initially a flattering term, or is that sounds derogatory? Is that what people call it that don't like it, or was that what it was called?
Oh, well, there's actually a good story behind that.
Oh, good. Good.
So basically, sometime, around the middle 20th century, there got to be this movement saying that, these buildings that look beautiful and people enjoy, well, that's actually against a democratic impulse. And there's this sort of hackneyed philosophy is like, what would be more democratic and in keeping with the spirit of our age? Let's use concrete to make hideous buildings that people can't live in. as you can see, I'm doing a really good job to present their arguments in the best possible light.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But so that got out there, and that became sort of the accepted way that you build like a very cool, avant-garde building of importance, is to do it in that style with those sort of philosophical presuppositions. So when it's challenged, like when people, like there's literally just something floating around right now saying, hey, let's have federal buildings that are more in keeping with like, the local attitude, like if it's in the Southwest, maybe give it a Southwest flavor or whatever, and do buildings that people are comfortable in and, they enjoy looking at. The people like the fancy architecture programs like, well, that is not true architecture. Because true architecture, then they spout all these, philosophical truisms that seem obvious to them in their little subset.
Right.
But when you take it into a broader approach, it's like, no, I know you think this is in keeping with your set of philosophical principles, but your buildings are ugly.
Right.
And if you want to build buildings that are in keeping with the democratic spirit or whatever, maybe build buildings that people enjoy. Stepping off soapbox. If one of you is like a brutalist architect, feel free to write a nasty note at me. It's okay. I probably deserve it. Anyway, Gianna.
Oh, back to our original question.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're tracking the flow of the conversation, this is like one of those like rabbit holes that goes like sideways. And anyway, keep going.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So if our main question,
just to clarify.
was how being normal might help our art, right? That one. Okay. So I would compare my perspective on art to something maybe like Emily Dickinson. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that to say I'm that good. I say that because one of her poems comes to mind. That there's a line in it that says, "There's a certain slant of light of a winter afternoon that oppresses like the heft of an old cathedral tune." And it takes a certain way of looking at the world to notice a slant of light in the winter and to compare it to the oppressive, heavy notes of a song in a cathedral. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like being a normal person with a normal Starbucks account and a normal toddler in my backseat condemning me for getting coffee too often is a helpful thing, because I take these normal experiences and they mix with my art, and I end up seeing normal things in a different way. Right. And I wrote an essay last year about the first anthills that I saw in the spring and how that was a sign of hope. And I had never paid attention to anthills before. I'm usually not excited about ants, but being an ordinary person taking my 2-year-old on a walk, I noticed the ants. And so it was something that did help my art in that occasion. I don't know. That maybe does answer your question a little bit.
Considering. Yes, it does.
Wait, so you're saying that because ants are normal everyday occurrences, that makes writing about them normal?
I think I experience a lot of normal things, but I think about them in kind of a weird way. And so for me, a normal thing like an anthill on the sidewalk when I'm pushing my stroller turned into an essay about hope in the springtime, experienced over like the 3 different states I've lived in. So it's a normal thing that had a positive impact on my art. Does that make sense?
I understand the question so much better now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I know, I'm like, I don't think any of us answered it except Gianna, but that's all right.
Credit the ants with that one.
Okay.
What about my rant about architecture? I thought
it was entertaining and informative, and now I have to go look up brutalism.
Ooh.
Oh.
They probably have ants in their sidewalks.
Okay, no, go.
Oh, there are ants. Yeah, Gianna's right, I think. They have ants in the sidewalks around those buildings, so it all works.
Well, I just read a very upsetting article, upsetting to me because it was about, like, why do we need beautiful churches? And if you've ever looked at
very upsetting.
That's upsetting.
I know I'm preaching to the choir. No need to chime in. Anyways, the author of this particular article was trying very hard to be non-biased she was biased, but she was trying to consider both sides. Like, why do we need beautiful churches? And then her bias was toward the art of, or the church of the future, and saying that like home church and like no church building and no congregational meeting place other than like very small, intimate gatherings. Like she was kind of like, let's go back to Jesus, 12 disciples.
Oh, yeah, the Acts church.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were valid points, but also, like, it was definitely under my skin and obviously yours. Talking about, like, I think one sentence in the article actually said, like, if you're going to build a building, don't consider beauty. And I just, like, fell on the floor, basically.
I would have assumed she was being sarcastic. That's crazy.
I was upset, and my kids were like, Mom, what's wrong? Is that book making you angry? And I was like, yes, it is.
Bring me a coffee. No.
And yes, this is a very safe place to express this opinion.
I know.
So.
I guess I've been waiting for my moment.
Yes.
All the people listening to this are, yep, she's right. You're right. And I'll make a quick plug, because I'll include this with the show notes. If you want to read my opinion, but expressed in a more cogent thought, there's a guy I went to school with named Nathan Robinson who is wrote up why modern architecture is bad, and I'll send a link. It's good. So we're winding down time, so I think this would be a good time if we could just have a message to listeners. I think there are probably a lot of listeners. I think most people feel the way we do, or sometimes you're the weirdo, sometimes you're normal. But let's assume you're one of those listeners who oftentimes thinks, I can't really get involved in the art world. I'm too normal. I can't see the blah, blah, blah. What would be your message to the person who fears they are too normal to really dig into art? Who should I pick on first? Mandy.
I would guess that you are weirder than you think you are. So if that's comforting, then that's good. But also, artists are, for the most part, the ones I know, the Anselm artists, are very welcoming. And one of the cool things about being with a bunch of weirdos is they're very accepting of whatever you are. And they welcome you in, and they're interested in your perspective on anthills and architecture and things like that.
I think that this is the one most developed thought I've had about this whole podcast, and I've been stewing on it all week, so I have to get it out there. I think a lot of art doesn't necessarily come from weird or normal people. I think it stems largely from a way of seeing and interacting with the world around us. And so if you feel too normal, or like you don't have enough like oddities or eccentricities, you have a way of seeing the world, and that can impact people in ways you would not expect. I'm, often surprised, like I write little things and people will be like, oh my goodness, that was amazing or so encouraging. I'm like, oh, well, it was about an anthill. I just wrote it because I felt desperately in need of hope, and I saw an anthill and it was very hopeful. But your way of seeing the world is different from anyone else's, and we need that perspective.
I like that. And you gave me a thought about, I was skimming a little bit through The Artist's Way, the Julia Cameron book, and she talks about how especially people who admire art and can appreciate it, usually there's an artist underneath all of that who's just been suppressed or abused in some way, early on probably. So especially, that probably describes the entire Anselm community, people who appreciate art. There's another book that's definitely normal called Growth Mindset, and I forget the author's name. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I've seen it. I can see the cover, but not the author's name.
And there's a whole chapter in there about how anybody can be an artist, and I have friends who were told they could, they could never do art, and they could never draw, but then later in life just kind of picked up a pencil or a paintbrush and started working on it, and there is something about the actual developing the skill to do it and just practicing, and that's basically what the growth mindset thing is just trying and trying again. So that's pretty mainstream too. So there's your normal advice for the day.
Yeah.
Well, going off on that normal advice, it's probably a good time to wrap up. We are winding down our time here at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Pub goers are shuffling back to their homes. The fire's down to embers, and you realize it's past your normal bedtime. See what I did there? Once again, if you want to learn more about the Anselm Society, visit us at anselmsociety.org and check out our Facebook page for more content on arts, faith, and the centric artist. So on behalf of the Believe to See table, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.